Hi, this is Mark Laughlin with the Ambidextral Gunfighter, www.ambgun.com. This is episode 3 of the Ambidextral Gunfighter video series. And this is where we're going to talk about what we are looking for in our equipment, specifically our rifle. Now, I found through my Appleseed prep videos that most people tend to want to focus on equipment. And for those of you who have skipped episode 1 and 2, or just as a refresher, want to quickly do an executive summary of episode 1 and episode 2. The key theme of episode 1 is, why do you want to become ambidextrous? The key advantage is for the optimal use of cover, and also to establish a much more solid position given the terrain, a more solid shooting position given the terrain you're dealing with. Episode 2 was how to become an ambidextral gunfighter, and basically it was training your eyes to eliminate eye dominance, and we did that by progressively moving back from cover with both eyes open, working both sides of cover. Now, what are we looking for in an ambidextral rifle? Number 1 is we want full, perfect mirroring of the rifle. For example, you wouldn't want a rifle that had a trigger brake that was 5 pounds and crisp when shooting right-handed, but 15 pounds and very gritty or creepy when shooting left-handed. I mean, clearly we don't want that. And we want the exact same thing with the rest of the rifles. We don't want anything interfering with perfect mirroring. And as we talked about in episode 1, you want perfect mirroring because your brain will quickly learn to copy basically the skills you developed right-handed to left-handed, or vice versa, left-handed to right-handed. Another thing is we want to make sure that the rifle has no interference items. Anything that interferes with perfect mirroring left and right. Now, here is the awesome, a spectacular example of the stoner design, the AR-15 by BCM. This is their BCM Recce. And some of the interference items on this, one starting with the optic, the ACOG had big, huge bulbous nuts on the side of it. And so to alleviate that, I've trimmed those down, gone with much smaller mounting nuts on the side. So there's nothing to interfere, so that's the same, as close to the same as I can make it on both sides. Now, the other thing that's interfering on the AR-15 is this forward assist, which interferes with the side operation of the charging handle. See, it's different one side to the other. Now, of course, also on the AR-15 we have our magazine release on the right hand side and basically nothing on the left hand side. Now, this one I've put in a Arms Unlimited. It makes it kind of an Ambi mag release. It's not perfect. Doesn't feel the same left and right, but it does help attenuate the AR's failings in the far as being an ambidextrous weapon. And then of course you have your slide release here, which you cannot really mirror on the other side because you've got your ejection port. Now, there are bad levers you can put on it to give you, this clutter you can add on that will create a slide release on the other side, but it's just not optimal. A terrific rifle given its 50-year-old design, but dated. I can imagine if I were during World War II and I had just been handed an M1 Garand and was turning in my M1903, the Garand is to the M1903 as the Desert Tech MDR is to the Stoner design or the AR M4 platform. Now, a Bullpup rifle, which has an ejection port on the side, like some of the Tavors and some of the others like that, you basically cannot switch to shooting left-handed or you're going to get pummeled in the face by the cases coming out of that ejection port. And so that's a limiting factor with many of the Bullpups. Now, the Desert Tech does a forward ejection where it's throwing the round out from this ejection port forward so it doesn't hit you in the face. Other manufacturers like Kel-Tec have come up with the downward ejection or on their RDB, or the forward ejection on their RFB. So those are some potential solutions to solving the problems for the problems for the Bullpup in regards to the Ambidextral Gunfighter. Now let's consider some really non-ambidextrous related criteria for what we want to look for in the next generation squad weapon. One is you want optimal barrel length. You don't want to make your barrel so short that you're losing velocity. You want that extra velocity for penetration of potentially body armor or cover. But you do want an shorter overall length in order to work behind cover. Now, sometimes when you're up close to cover, and you would be really close tight on cover if you're facing flanking opponents. In paintball, we came up with this technique that we called T versus I, and if you're in a one-on-one gunfight, you can back off of your cover quite a bit and work both sides of it in your gunfight with a single opponent. But if you're working if you're on a gunfight and it's you versus 2 opponents or 3 opponents or multiple opponents, then you have to get up tight behind that cover if they are starting to flank you. If they create angles on you, then you need to be tight behind cover, and that's when the shorter overall length lets you shift from one side of the cover quickly and easily, whereas a longer rifle, even though this is the same barrel length as the Desertec MDR, its overall length is about 8 inches longer. And so moving from one side of the cover typically is going to mean raising the barrel up, transitioning over, coming back over, raising the barrel up, and like that. Whereas the MDR or a Bullpup, you can switch from one side to the other side really quickly without necessarily having to raise your muzzle. Now, another thing is you want to reduce the total mass of your weapon, and you want to have a weapon that's as light as you can make it given the caliber you're using. And a couple of reasons, besides the fact that you'll have to carry it around with you, you want to reduce your overall weight. So if you can reduce the weight of the weapon, you can carry more ammo or other stuff, other gear. But a lighter weapon is going to be able to snap out from cover and make a shot and get back in much quicker. Whereas if you have a heavier weapon, it's going to be a little bit slower getting in and out. Now that's just one thing with regards to mass. Now also you have to consider where that weight is placed and where your balance point is. Now the AR, holding it by the pistol grip like this, you find that it feels quite heavy because you've got a lot of length here beyond your balance point. Think of your balance point right at the web of your thumb, versus an MDR or a Bullpup, in which your web of your thumb balance point is more midship of the weapon. And so actually this one balances towards the rear. It's muzzle light. Now, like the reason we want muzzle light, I mean the muzzle light does make having to manage the recoil potentially an issue, a rising muzzle, if it's extra light. But it does make it so that you can dive into cover one-handed. You can hold your weapon and dive to cover and not have the weight of the muzzle pull down, dig into the ground, jam into your shoulder, and probably cause you a separated shoulder, broken collarbone, a pretty serious injury. Whereas with a Bullpup, with the pistol grip in the middle of the rifle, the weight is more to the rear. It actually feels a lot more like a paintball gun, and you can actually, like a paintball gun, hold it to the side and then dive into cover. And that is something we do routinely in paintball. Now, you might think that, well, you know, soldiers not going to just dive into cover because there's probably glass, rocks, all kinds of debris in the battlefield terrain. But if the option is diving for cover on top of glass and rocks versus getting shot, I think most people will choose diving for cover to fight, despite how uncomfortable it might be. Now, one of the things we find with the we're talking also the mass out at the extended length of the barrel of like the AR. This is basically 24 inches from your balance point or your fulcrum point out to the muzzle. Now, the other area of dealing with the weight and mass and it being extended out beyond your fulcrum point is shifting from target to target, moving that weight extended well beyond your fulcrum point horizontally. You see a lot of the 3-gun competition shooters have developed the C-shaped or C-clamp shooting stance, where you grip way out at the end of the muzzle so that you can shove that thing from target to target. Now, with the bullpup rifle, the fact that the weight isn't close to your body and your hand at just a standard support position, which is still close to the body, where you have a lot of muscular leverage on it and skeletal leverage on it, you're able to shift it very easily horizontally. So the MDR loaded with 20 rounds of .308 weighs 11 pounds 6 ounces, and that's in comparison to the BCM. An AR and an M4 might be equivalent, which weighs 8 pounds 2 ounces loaded with 30 rounds. But the weight on the MDR is so much closer to your body, you're able to shift it from horizontally from target to target much quicker without doing this extended, tiring C-clamp hold. And then besides the C-clamp hold, what we found is another way they've decided to try to resolve and improve that horizontal capability of movement, and also to be able to shoot from behind cover, close behind cover, is there's been this a big fad lately with the SBRs, the short-barreled rifles. And so they get the barrels down to where they're, half the length, 8 to 10 inches long or shorter. So they're basically pistols, AR pistols. And then that way they've got that quick movement and able to work behind cover. But why do that? Why go to a shorter barrel, give up that velocity, when you can have the full length barrel in an overall package that's the same weight? To kind of switch and go back to this whole obsession with the stopwatch, which we see in 3-gun competition, the run and guns, and even the tactical games. All disciplines and shooting sports that I admire what the shooters have accomplished within that realm, but I do not think it applies very well or transfers very well to gunfighting. Now, certain skill sets have tactical use in gunfighting, but that overall attitude, I think, is misguided. Now, I've talked about it before, is the emphasis, this obsession with the stopwatch. Now, speed, I think, is a useful tactic, but this obsession with it has created a bastardization of our equipment and our techniques that are not applicable or fully applicable to the gunfighting world. For example, if you took a 3-gun shooter and you put him onto a paintball field, the tournament paintball field with inflatable bunkers, and you had them run drills just like they do in 3-gun competition, where they're running a maze and shooting targets, and they drill on that over and over and over, and that's all they do. Now, if they were to go compete in a head-to-head competition where their targets are shooting back, where it's a paintball gun battle, you'll find that they get smoked. They just do not learn to make good use of cover. Now, if you take 3-gun competitors and use their training style and take them to a paintball field, a tournament inflatable bunker paintball field, and you have them practice their drills that they do in 3-gun, where they're running this maze and shooting, you know, targets, stationary, static targets, as they run through a course of fire and see how fast they can do it. And that's the only training they do. And then they go and you throw them into a gunfight and an actual paintball tournament where they're facing opponents that are shooting back. The results, I think, will prove quite grim. They'll end up getting smoked because they're just not developing that awareness of careful use of cover, and they don't learn to be fully ambidextrous to make use of the cover. While you may want to make use of speed, there's times when speed is useful in burst, but it is not the 100% focused obsession. Speed is a useful tactic, but it should not be an obsession. Now, another thing we want to look at is efficient controls. Now, on the AR, when you do a magazine change, you drop the mag, you feed in a new mag, and then you slap the slide release to chamber the round. That's 3 movements. The MDR, you drop your mag, you're feeding a new one, and at the same time you're feeding the mag, you hit this slide release, all one fluid movement. You basically eliminated a whole step in the reloading process with the MDR. And so efficiency is important, as well as being perfectly ambidextrously mirrored. You want all the controls mirrored left and right. Another thing we want to look for, and I haven't figured it out yet, is how we carry the rifle. Now, the typical thing is with the AR, you're carrying a 1, 2, or 3-point sling, and it's when you release the rifle that drops down just in front of you. But with its overall length, it's a little bit awkward still to work with. That is an advantage of the Bullpup with its short overall length, that if you do use that type of sling, it is going to take up a lot less space. In fact, I've kind of often thought that maybe you could use a chest mounted, like a heavy duty Kydex holster, and click it into that rather than using a sling. So we want to think of the non-fighting movement, non-fighting mobility, the ability to move this weapon that I'm carrying to the fight, or to get ourselves away from the fight while retaining possession of our weapon. And this gives me the ability to run without having this weapon bouncing against my chest or bouncing against my legs. I've seen the competitors in the tactical games competitions, which are awesome to watch, by the way. I highly recommend you check them out, and if not, compete in them. But you see the competitors when they're doing those 2-mile runs, and their ARs are like bouncing all over the place. And so maybe a retention system similar to a backpack scabbard has potential for that as well. The access of it is not nearly as quick as with a sling, but it does leave your hands 100% free, and your mobility is terrific. You're able to run, and of course you still have easy access to your sidearm. Weight is going to be a key thing with our next generation squad weapon. We have our soldiers, as I understand, are sometimes carrying 80-pound rucksacks. I'm not sure if it's actually an 80-pound rucksack or if that's their total load. Still, it's a lot. And you need to look at every ounce that you're carrying to make sure it's justified. And you want to reduce the weight of all your equipment as much as possible. For example, if I can reduce the weight of the rifle, that means maybe I can carry another magazine of ammo, or have more ammo for my sidearm, or a different more powerful sidearm, or carry first aid gear. I mean, there's just a lot of options. We're also looking at like body armor, which is heavy, 15 to 30 pounds just right there, which is a huge percentage of your overall carrying load. So keeping the weight load is critical. And then with our trying to reduce the weight, what we want to achieve is, one, a high number of rounds available per ounce for that weapon system. So that for the amount of weight you're carrying, you want to be able to carry of that weight a large number of rounds for that weapon given the weight. So if you had like a 50-pound weapon and you can only carry 5 rounds because of the heavy weight of the weapon, well, that's maybe not as good as maybe an AR at 5.56, where you can carry a lightweight 8-round weapon and carry hundreds of rounds of ammo, or the 308. Now the other thing besides just rounds per ounce or rounds per pounds is we also want to look at total kinetic energy that we can deliver based on our carrying weight. And so because you need to be able to deliver kinetic energy to your target. Now in some situations, a 5.56 may be enough kinetic energy, or even your sidearm may provide enough kinetic energy if you're dealing with soft targets. But once you start dealing with targets that are using cover, or are wearing body armor, or are in vehicles or armored vehicles, then you're going to need heavier weaponry, much more kinetic energy to deal with that, to get your bullet through into the target. So what can we look for in the future? I think, and we'll do the review in the next video on the Desertec MDR in 308, but in the future, what might we see beyond, say, a bullpup that's perfectly ambidextrous? We may see maybe electronic triggers, and that's what we use in paintball, which are very light. You have a switch, you turn them on and off, and you can set them up just however you need them. You can electronically switch between different modes of fire, and have a very smooth, consistent, crisp break with an electronic trigger. No mechanical devices to get in the way. Of course, electronic triggers perhaps could be interfered with by using, EMP-like technology. So maybe that won't happen. But maybe we could use hydraulic, tiny hydraulics running from the trigger back to the hammer to run the system, instead of running that long trigger bar back. Another thing is the mag releases. It could be that we could make those lighter and easier to operate. Maybe they could be electronic or hydraulic. So that's a potential option there for our future. And then of course the next generation thing would be caseless ammo. We'd want to, if we can eliminate the case, and we have, say, a liquid propellant, so that we can fill the weapon up with a liquid propellant, a liquid powder, a liquid smokeless powder. Then we fill up the tank with the liquid powder, and then we'd have our bullets. This magazine would actually hold bullets, not cartridges, and it would just hold bullets. And then your liquid powder would be, say, fed into here somewhere, and then you would not have that case you have to eject. No ejection issues to deal with, and so that could certainly be future development, but I think that's probably still decades away. Anyway, so I hope what I've done here is help kind of do a mental exercise and start brainstorming about what we need in the next generation squad weapon, and to do this kind of police sketch of what that weapon would look like. Now, I think I found that weapon for at least now, and I will be reviewing that in the next video, the final video, the Ambidextral Gunfighter series, when I do a full review on the Desertec MDR and 308. This is Mark Laughlin with the Ambidextral Gunfighter at www.ambgun.com. Thanks for watching the video. Please like, share, and subscribe.